They looked right through her. To the high society elite filling the ballroom, the woman in the plain grey suit was invisible, just another member of the help to be ordered around, ignored, or mocked. The vice president of operations even snapped her fingers at her, demanding she clear a table of dirty champagne flutes. She obeyed, lowering her head, hiding a smile that would have terrified them all. Because they didn't know that the man they were all desperate to impress, the CEO of the entire conglomerate, kissed that maid goodbye every morning. They let her sit with the staff, not realizing she owned the building, the company, and effectively, their futures. The rain in Seattle was relentless, a grey curtain that seemed to wash away all color from the streets. Catherine Holloway stepped out of the black sedan, her heels clicking softly on the wet pavement outside the service entrance of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. She wasn't supposed to be at the service entrance, and she certainly wasn't supposed to be wearing a charcoal grey pantsuit that she usually reserved for gardening or quick runs to the grocery store. Tonight was the 20th anniversary gala of Holloway Logistics, the multi-billion-dollar shipping empire her husband, Arthur, had built from the ground up. Technically, they had built it together, using her inheritance to buy his first 3 trucks. But Catherine preferred the shadows. She hated the flashbulbs, the fake smiles, and the endless questions about her jewelry. So the world knew Arthur Holloway as the titan of industry, and Catherine was simply the name on the family trust. "Are you sure you don't want me to drive around to the front, Mrs. Holloway?" the driver, Thomas, asked, looking concerned as he held the umbrella over her. "No, Thomas. The main entrance is swarming with paparazzi. I just want to slip in, go up to the suite, and change into my gown before Arthur arrives from the airport," Catherine said, clutching her garment bag tightly. "Besides, I'm early. No one needs to know I'm here yet." She shivered as a gust of wind blew rain onto her face. "Go on, Thomas. Get yourself some dinner. I'll see you at the end of the night." She ducked inside the heavy metal doors, expecting to find the quiet service elevator. Instead, she walked straight into chaos. The back of the house was a hive of panicked activity. Waiters in white jackets were sprinting with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Chefs were shouting orders in French and Spanish, and the air smelled of searing steak and stress. "Move! Move! We are behind schedule!" A shrill voice pierced the noise. Catherine pressed herself against the wall to avoid being run over by a cart of dirty dishes. She looked for the elevator, but her path was blocked by a woman who looked less like a human being and more like a weaponized fashion statement. Linda Grayson, the newly appointed VP of Operations for Holloway Logistics, stood in the center of the hallway, clutching a clipboard like a shield. Catherine knew Linda only from Arthur's complaints. "She's efficient, Cat, but she lacks empathy," Arthur had said last week. "I'm thinking of letting her go, but I need to see how she handles the gala first." Catherine adjusted her glasses. She hadn't met Linda in person before. Linda was taller than she expected, wearing a red dress that cost more than most people's cars, her blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "You!" Linda shouted, pointing a manicured finger directly at Catherine. Catherine looked around, realized she was the only one standing still, and pointed at herself. "Me?" "Yes, you. The agency said they were sending a replacement for the coat check girl who called in sick. But you look too old for coat check," Linda sneered, scanning Catherine's damp grey suit and frizzy hair. "And my God, look at those shoes. Practical, I suppose. You must be the extra hands for the floor setup." Catherine opened her mouth to correct her. "I'm Catherine Holloway. I own 51% of the stock options you're hoping to vest next year." But something stopped her. It was the tone of Linda's voice. It was a tone Catherine hadn't heard directed at herself in 20 years, pure, unfiltered condescension. It was the way people spoke to you when they thought you had no power. I I just arrived, Catherine said softly, deciding in a split second to see where this would go. She held her garment bag behind her back. Well, don't just stand there gaping like a fish. We are down 3 servers, and the floral arrangements on tables 40 through 50 are a disaster, Linda barked, checking her watch. Put your bag in the staff locker room. Grab an apron. If you're seen by a guest looking like that, I will personally ensure you never work in this city again. Move! Catherine felt a spark of anger in her chest, hot and sharp, but beneath it, a dark curiosity bloomed. Arthur needed to know if Linda was bad for the company. What better way to conduct a performance review than from the trenches? Yes, ma'am, Catherine said, lowering her head. She found the locker room, shoved her couture Givenchy gown into a rusted locker, and walked back out. She didn't grab an apron, but she did grab a tray of silverware someone had abandoned. She walked into the ballroom. It was magnificent. Gold and crystal chandeliers dripped light onto the tables. But Catherine didn't look at the decor. She looked at the staff. They looked terrified. She began placing forks on a table near the back, near the kitchen doors. This was the staff table, usually reserved for the event coordinators, the photographer's assistants, and the on-site security. Hey, a young man whispered next to her. He looked about 20, with messy brown hair and a tie that was crooked. His name tag read Ben. You knew? You could say that, Catherine replied, aligning a knife perfectly. I'm Cat. I'm Ben. Look out for the dragon lady, he muttered, nodding toward Linda, who was currently screaming at the florist. She fired Sarah 10 minutes ago because she sneezed while holding a napkin. She fired someone for sneezing? Catherine asked, her brow furrowing. Yep. Said it was unhygienic and low class. She's on a warpath tonight. She thinks the big boss, Mr. Holloway, is going to promote her to COO tonight. Catherine smoothed the tablecloth. Is that so? Yeah. Rumor is she's trying to make everything perfect to impress him. But the way she treats us... Man, if I didn't need this tuition money, I'd walk. Tuition? Catherine asked. Engineering degree. Ben smiled tiredly. University of Washington. 2 more semesters. Catherine smiled back, a genuine, warm smile. Hang in there, Ben. The night is young. You never know who's watching. Just then, Linda stormed over to their table. She loomed over Ben, her perfume overpowering the smell of the lilies. Your tie is crooked, she hissed. Ben jumped, his hands fumbling to fix it. Sorry, Miss Grayson, I don't pay you to make excuses. I pay you to be invisible furniture, she spat. She turned her gaze to Catherine. And you? Why are you chatting? This isn't a social club. These are the worst tables in the house, hidden by the pillars, but they still need to be set. This is where the staff and the unimportant +1 sit. Make sure it's clean, but don't waste the good champagne here. Save the Dom Perignon for the VIP tables up front. Understood, Catherine said, her voice steady. The unimportant people get the cheap wine. Exactly. Now chop chop. The guests are arriving in 20 minutes, and for God's sake, fix your hair. You look like a witch. Linda spun on her heel and marched away. Catherine touched her hair. It was frizzy from the rain. She looked at Ben, who looked like he was about to cry from humiliation. She's charming, Catherine said dryly. She's a monster, Ben whispered. Don't worry, Ben, Catherine said, picking up a water pitcher. Monsters always get slain in the end. She looked across the room to the VIP table, the one with the centerpiece the size of a small tree. That was where she was supposed to be sitting. Right next to Arthur. Arthur is going to be very confused when he sees an empty chair, she thought. But he's going to be even more interested in what his wife has to say about the wine service. The doors opened, and the elite of Seattle poured in. It was a sea of black tuxedos and dresses that sparkled like crushed diamonds. Catherine recognized faces immediately. There was Robert Sterling, the banker who had denied Arthur his first loan 25 years ago, now laughing loudly and patting people on the back as if he owned the place. There was the mayor, shaking hands. And there were the board members of Holloway Logistics, men and women Catherine had hosted for dinner at her own home, walking right past her without a second glance. Catherine stood by the pillar near the kitchen, holding a tray of empty glasses she had cleared. It was a surreal kind of invisibility. When she was Catherine Holloway, people laughed at her unfunny jokes and hung on her every word. As Cat the Temp, she was an obstacle to be maneuvered around. "Excuse me," a man snapped, bumping into her shoulder hard enough to make the glasses rattle. It was Greg Pelson, the CFO. He didn't even look back. He was too busy trying to flag down a waiter with a tray of crab cakes. Catherine steadied herself. She watched Linda Grayson working the room. The transformation was terrifying. The woman who had been screaming at a crying florist 5 minutes ago was now beaming, laughing delicately, and touching the arms of the board members. "Oh, Robert, you must try the tartare," Linda cooed, her voice unrecognizable. "I had it flown in specially." "You've outdone yourself, Linda," Robert Sterling boomed. "Arthur is lucky to have you. Where is the man of the hour?" "He's delayed at the airport, sadly," Linda sighed dramatically. "But he'll be here. And his wife, well, you know Catherine. She's so fragile. She might not make it. She often finds these events too overwhelmed." Catherine stiffened. Fragile? She ran marathons. She had raised 3 children while managing the charitable arm of the company. She wasn't fragile. She just possessed a low tolerance for hypocrisy. "A shame," Robert said, taking a sip of the expensive champagne. "Arthur needs a strong woman beside him, not a recluse." Linda lowered her voice, simulating intimacy. "Well, that's why I try to take as much off his plate as possible. The company needs a firm hand." Catherine gripped the tray so hard her knuckles turned white. Linda wasn't just mean. She was ambitious and actively undermining Catherine's reputation to elevate her own. "Hey, Cat," Ben appeared at her elbow, looking pale. "Table 42 needs water. I have to go help at the bar. The bartender is drowning." "I've got it," Catherine said. She swapped her tray for a pitcher of ice water and walked toward table 42. This was the table Linda had designated for the unimportant staff. Sitting there were 3 people. One was a young woman with red-rimmed eyes, the florist Linda had screamed at earlier. Another was an older man in a frayed suit, who Catherine recognized as the head of the janitorial night crew, Mr. Henderson. And the third was a young woman in a sharp blazer, typing furiously on her phone. Catherine poured water for Mr. Henderson. "Thank you, miss," he said, his voice gravelly and kind. "Don't worry about us. We know we aren't supposed to be seen." "Everyone deserves water, Mr. Henderson," Catherine said. He looked up, startled. "You know my name?" I saw it on the staff list," she lied quickly. "How are you enjoying the evening?" "It's the same as every year," he sighed, looking at his bread roll. "We clean the floors so they can dance, and then we clean the confetti when they leave. But this year feels different. That woman, Ms. Grayson, she cut the holiday bonus for the maintenance staff. Said it was budget reallocation for the gala." Catherine froze. The holiday bonus was sacrosanct. Arthur had personally guaranteed it in the company bylaws 10 years ago. "She cut the bonus?" "Slash it in half," the florist sniffled. "And she refused to pay me for the overtime on the centerpieces. She said if I complained, she'd blacklist my business." The woman in the blazer looked up from her phone. She had sharp eyes. "She's leveraging the budget to pay for this," she gestured to the room. The caviar alone cost more than the maintenance team's bonuses combined. I'm in accounting. I saw the invoices. Catherine poured water for the accountant. What's your name? Sarah, the accountant said. I'm junior, so I keep my mouth shut. But if Mr. Holloway knew. He doesn't know, Catherine asked. Linda controls what reaches his desk, Sarah whispered, looking around fearfully. She filters the reports. He thinks profits are up because of efficiency. He doesn't know it's because she's bleeding the staff dry. Catherine felt a cold fury settling in her stomach. It wasn't just rudeness. It was theft. It was cruelty masked as corporate strategy. Arthur would be devastated. He prided himself on Holloway Logistics being a family-first company. Why doesn't anyone tell him? Catherine asked. Who? Mr. Henderson laughed sadly. The janitor? The junior accountant? We don't get to talk to Arthur Holloway. We don't even get to talk to his assistant. We just sit at the back. You're talking to me, Catherine said. You're just a server, dear, Mr. Henderson said kindly. No offense, but you have as much power as we do, which is 0. Catherine smiled. It was a terrifying smile, though Mr. Henderson interpreted it as reassuring. You'd be surprised what a server can do, she said. Suddenly, a hush fell over the room. The double doors at the main entrance swung open. The murmurs began, a wave of sound traveling from the front of the room to the back. He's here, Ben whispered, rushing past Catherine. Arthur Holloway walked in. He was 60, with silver hair and a build that suggested he still chopped his own wood. He wore a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, but he looked uncomfortable. His eyes scanned the room, bypassing the eager faces of the board members, bypassing Linda Grayson, who was practically vibrating with excitement. He was looking for someone. He checked his watch. He frowned. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and looked at the screen. Catherine watched him from the shadows of the kitchen pillar. She saw him text someone. A second later, the phone in her pocket buzzed against her leg. She didn't answer it. He looks mad, Sarah the accountant whispered. He's not mad, Catherine murmured, almost to herself. He's worried. Linda Grayson intercepted Arthur before he could take 5 steps. She placed a hand on his arm, a gesture entirely too familiar. Catherine watched Arthur politely, but firmly remove his arm. He said something to Linda. Linda pointed toward the VIP table, then gestured vaguely toward the ceiling, likely implying Catherine was in the suite upstairs. Arthur nodded, looking relieved. He allowed Linda to guide him toward the stage. All right, listen up. Linda's voice rang out, snapping her fingers at the staff. She had rushed back to the kitchen area while Arthur was being greeted by the mayor. The CEO is seated. Dinner service begins now. And remember, if you drop anything, if you spill anything, don't bother coming back for your paycheck. You walk out the back door. She locked eyes with Catherine. And you. You're on the VIP table. One of the servers has a migraine. You take the wine service for the head table. Catherine blinked. Me? Yes, you. Don't speak to Mr. Holloway. Don't look at him. Just pour the wine and vanish. If you embarrass me, I will destroy you. Catherine nodded slowly. I understand. I'll be invisible. She took the heavy bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon. She smoothed her grey suit. She took a deep breath. It was time to serve her husband dinner. The walk from the service station to table 1 felt like crossing a minefield. Catherine moved with the practiced, gliding step she had learned in finishing school decades ago, a skill she usually employed to navigate garden parties, not to serve wine to her own employees while disguised as help. Table 1 was a round, expansive surface draped in gold silk. At the center sat Arthur, looking like a lion trapped in a petting zoo. To his right sat Robert Sterling, the boisterous banker. To his left sat Linda Grayson. Linda had rearranged the seating cards. Catherine noted this immediately. That seat was meant for the CFO's wife. Linda had placed herself at Arthur's right hand, a position of intimacy and power. As Catherine approached, the conversation drifted toward her. "It really is a shame Catherine couldn't make it," Linda was saying, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. She placed a hand on Arthur's forearm. "I know how difficult she finds these crowds. It must be a burden for you, Arthur, having a partner who can't share in your triumphs." Arthur pulled his arm away, reaching for his water glass. "Catherine isn't a burden, Linda. She's the reason we have triumphs to celebrate. And she texted me 10 minutes ago, saying she was in the building." Linda laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Oh, Arthur, you know how she gets. She probably panicked in the lobby and had the driver take her home. I spoke to security. They haven't seen her. Don't worry, I've handled everything. You focus on the speech." Catherine felt a vein in her temple throb. Panicked in the lobby? She stepped into the gap between Arthur and Linda, the bottle of Cabernet poised. "Wine, sir?" she asked softly. She kept her head down, her glasses sliding slightly down her nose. Arthur didn't look up. He was staring at his empty plate, his jaw set tight. "Please," Catherine poured. The rich red liquid swirled into the crystal. She filled the glass to the perfect level, then rotated the bottle with a snap of her wrist to prevent a single drop from staining the tablecloth, a move of professional elegance that was entirely out of place for a clumsy temp. She moved to Linda. "Careful," Linda snapped, pulling her dress away before Catherine had even tilted the bottle. "This is Italian silk. If you spill a drop, I'll deduct the cleaning bill from your wages." "I wouldn't dream of it, ma'am," Catherine murmured. At the sound of her voice, Arthur froze. His hand, which had been reaching for his fork, stopped in mid-air. He knew that voice. He had heard that voice whisper good night to him for 30 years. He had heard it soothe their children, scold the dogs, and debate the merits of tax law over breakfast. Slowly, incredibly slowly, Arthur turned his head. He looked at the grey pantsuit. He looked at the frizzy hair damp from the rain. He looked at the sensible, orthopedic-style shoes. And then he looked at the hands holding the wine bottle. On the ring finger of the left hand, turned inward so the stone faced the palm, a habit she had when walking in questionable neighborhoods, was a vintage emerald ring. It wasn't flashy, but it was one of a kind. He had bought it for her in Vienna in 1998. Arthur looked up, past the glasses, and locked eyes with the server. Catherine's blue eyes sparkled behind the cheap frames. She gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Not yet. Arthur's mouth opened slightly, then closed. A slow, confused but dawning realization washed over his face. He looked from his wife to Linda, then back to his wife. He saw the anger in Catherine's eyes, directed squarely at his VP of operations. He cleared his throat. "Excellent pour," Arthur said, his voice a little strangled. "What is your name?" Linda rolled her eyes. "Arthur, don't distract the help. They have a schedule." "I asked her name, Linda," Arthur said, his tone sharpening. "My name is Kat, sir," Catherine said, her voice steady. "Kat," Arthur repeated, testing the weight of it. "Well, Kat, you seem overqualified." "I do what needs to be done, sir. Sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to see what's really going on." Linda scoffed, taking a large gulp of wine. "Don't flatter her, Arthur. She was late, she's dressed like a vagrant, and I caught her gossiping with the janitorial staff earlier. She's lucky I didn't have security throw her out into the rain." Arthur's knuckles turned white as he gripped his napkin. You were going to throw her out? We have standards, Arthur. This is Holloway Logistics. We project excellence. We don't project— She waved a dismissive hand at Catherine. Mediocrity. Catherine didn't flinch. She just topped off Linda's glass, perhaps a little too generously, forcing Linda to lean forward to sip it to avoid a spill. I'll be sure to remember that, Mum, Catherine said. Standards are important. She moved away from the table, fading back into the shadows. Arthur watched her go. He wasn't looking at his phone anymore. He was sitting up straighter, a strange energy radiating from him. He turned to Linda, a predator finally noticing the prey sitting next to him. So, Arthur said, his voice dangerously calm. Tell me more about how you've handled everything, Linda, specifically regarding the staff. Linda beamed, thinking she had his full attention. Oh, Arthur, I've been ruthless with the budget. I trimmed the fat. Catering costs are down 15%. Labor costs down 20%. I found redundancies in the maintenance department and the support staff. I'm preparing a report for the board meeting next week. I think you'll find I've saved the company nearly $250,000 this quarter alone. $250,000, Arthur repeated. And where did those savings come from, specifically? Efficiencies, Linda said vaguely. Vendor negotiations. From the shadows Catherine watched, she knew exactly where the money came from. It came from Mr. Henderson's bonus. It came from the florist's overtime. It came from the pockets of the people who actually made the company run. And now her husband knew she was watching. The game was on. The dinner service was a blur of motion. Plates of filet mignon were set down, wine was replenished, and the hum of conversation grew louder as the alcohol took effect. Catherine worked the room, but she kept gravitating back to table 1. Every time she passed, she caught snippets of Linda's pitch. Linda wasn't just trying to impress Arthur. She was trying to isolate him. Robert agrees with me, Linda said, gesturing to the banker who was busy eating. The current CFO is too conservative. We need to be aggressive. If you appoint me as COO, Arthur, I can restructure the Asian division within 6 months. We could double our margins. By firing more people? Arthur asked, cutting a piece of steak. By trimming the dead weight, Linda corrected. Business isn't a charity, Arthur. You've always been too soft, too influenced by Catherine's sentimental projects, the orphanages, the scholarship funds. They're nice tax write-offs, but they drain focus. Catherine, standing behind Robert Sterling with a water pitcher, froze. Arthur set his knife and fork down with a clatter. The sound was loud enough that the table went silent. Catherine's projects, Arthur said quietly, are the soul of this company. Of course, Linda backpedaled quickly, sensing the shift in temperature. I just mean, in this economy, we need a killer instinct. We need someone at the helm who isn't afraid to make the hard choices. Someone who puts profit over popularity. She leaned in close. Arthur, the board is whispering. They think you're losing your edge. They think you're distracted. I'm just trying to protect you. Let me be your shield. Promote me. Give me the vote on the Kensington merger, and I will handle the dirty work. It was a naked power grab. It was bold, it was vicious, and it was entirely based on the assumption that Arthur was a tired old man. Arthur didn't answer immediately. Instead, he raised his hand and signaled. "Cat!" he called out. He didn't call the head waiter. He didn't call the maitre d'. He called the woman in the grey suit. Heads turned. Linda looked appalled. "Arthur, what do you need? I can get the manager." Catherine stepped forward immediately. "Yes, sir?" "My associate here," Arthur gestured to Linda, "believes that the staff are dead weight and that cutting their benefits is efficiency. Since you are working the floor tonight, and you seem to have your ear to the ground, I'd like your opinion." The silence at table 1 was absolute. Robert Sterling stopped chewing. The mayor, sitting 2 seats down, leaned in. Linda's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "Arthur, this is absurd. You're asking a waitress for business advice? She probably doesn't even have a high school diploma." Arthur ignored her. He kept his eyes locked on Catherine. "Well, Cat, is Linda right? Are we carrying dead weight?" Catherine adjusted her glasses. She looked at Linda, then at Arthur. She dropped the submissive servant posture. She stood up to her full height. When she spoke, her voice wasn't the soft murmur of a maid. It was the crisp, articulate projection of a woman who had been valedictorian of her class at Yale. "The issue, Mr. Holloway," Catherine began, her voice carrying clearly over the nearby tables, "is not the weight of the staff. The issue is the weight of the management's ego." Gasps rippled through the immediate vicinity. Linda's mouth fell open. "Excuse me?" Linda screeched. "You are fired. Get out! Security!" "Quiet, Linda," Arthur snapped. "Let her finish." Catherine continued, pacing slowly around the table like a professor in a lecture hall. "I spoke with the accounting department earlier tonight, specifically a junior associate named Sarah. She noticed that while the maintenance budget was cut by 40%, the administrative entertainment budget, which covers this gala, and specifically the floral arrangements and gift bags, was increased by 60%. Catherine looked at the centerpiece. "These are imported orchids from Thailand. They cost $4,000 per arrangement. Mr. Henderson, the head of janitorial, had his holiday bonus of $500 revoked to pay for 1/8 of this centerpiece." Linda stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Who gave you access to those numbers? This is corporate espionage. I will have you arrested." "Furthermore," Catherine went on, ignoring the threat, "I understand that the vendor for these orchids is a company called Grayson Florals, registered in the name of, let me guess, a relative?" Linda went pale. That is a lie." "Is it?" Catherine asked. "And the catering company? Elite Bites. I believe your brother-in-law runs that LLC, doesn't he? You're not cutting costs, Ms. Grayson. You're funneling company money into your family's pockets while starving the people who clean your floors." The room was buzzing now. The surrounding tables had stopped eating. Everyone was watching the grey-suited woman dismantle the VP of operations. You gutter rat," Linda hissed, losing all composure. She grabbed her glass of red wine. "Shut your mouth." She threw the wine. It was a desperate, trashy move. The dark red liquid arched through the air, aimed squarely at Catherine's face. But Catherine didn't flinch. She didn't have to. Arthur was faster. He had been waiting for this. He stood up and, with a speed that belied his age, caught Catherine's arm and pulled her sideways. The wine splashed harmlessly onto the floor and the hem of the mayor's tablecloth. "That," Arthur said, his voice thundering through the sudden silence of the ballroom, "was a mistake." Linda was breathing hard, her chest heaving. "Arthur, she's lying. She's a plant, probably sent by a competitor to humiliate me. Why are you listening to her? Look at her. She's a nobody." Arthur stepped around the table. He stood next to Catherine. He reached out and took her hand, the one with the emerald ring, and laced his fingers through hers. "Linda," Arthur said, his voice deadly calm. "You seem to be under a significant misunderstanding regarding the ownership structure of Holloway Logistics." "What?" Linda blinked, confused by the pivot. "You own the company, Arthur." "I own 49% of the voting stock," Arthur corrected. "I am the CIO. I run the day-to-day." He raised Catherine's hand, kissing her knuckles in front of the frozen room. But the majority shareholder, the person who owns the family trust that controls the other 51%? The person who actually signs your paycheck? Arthur gestured to the woman in the grey suit. Meet my wife, Catherine Holloway. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. It was the kind of silence where you could hear a pin drop. Linda's eyes bulged. She looked at Arthur. She looked at the woman she had called a witch, a vagrant, and a gutter rat. She looked at the grey suit. And then she looked at the face. Now that Catherine wasn't looking down, now that she held her head high, the resemblance to the woman in the company portraits, usually airbrushed and wearing diamonds, was undeniable. No, Linda whispered. No, she's at home. She's fragile. Catherine stepped forward. She took off her glasses and cleaned them on her lapel. I am fragile, Linda, Catherine said, her voice ice-cold. I have a very fragile tolerance for thieves and bullies. She turned to the stunned crowd. I apologize for the disruption to your dinner, Catherine announced, sounding every bit the matriarch of the empire. However, it appears we have some immediate personnel changes to address, if you'll excuse us. She looked at Linda. My office. Now. And bring your clipboard. Catherine didn't wait. She turned and walked toward the exit, her grey suit looking more commanding than any ball gown in the room. Arthur buttoned his jacket, shot a look of pure disappointment at Linda, and followed his wife. Linda stood there, the center of attention, but not in the way she had dreamed. She was shaking. She looked at Robert Sterling for help. Robert Sterling picked up his wine glass, turned his back to her, and continued eating his steak. Linda Grayson was alone. The walk to the hotel's executive suite was a death march for Linda Grayson. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, lined with plush carpet that muffled the sound of their footsteps. Arthur walked a step behind his wife, his face set in a mask of grim determination. Linda trailed them, her heels clicking erratically as she struggled to keep up, her mind racing for a lifeline, an excuse, a scapegoat, anything to survive the next hour. Catherine swiped a key card, and the heavy mahogany door to the temporary office swung open. She didn't sit on the sofa or the guest chairs. She walked straight behind the massive oak desk, a position of authority she usually shunned. Tonight, she claimed it. Arthur closed the door and leaned against it, crossing his arms. He was the jailer. Sit, Catherine said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Linda collapsed into the leather chair opposite the desk. The fight had drained out of her, replaced by a trembling, desperate calculation. Catherine. Mrs. Holloway, Linda began, her voice shaking. Please. You have to understand. The optics, the pressure on the quarterly earnings. I was trying to streamline operations. Maybe I cut too deep with the staff, I admit that. It was a mistaken judgment. But the accusations about the vendors, my family, that's just gossip. Catherine reached into the inside pocket of her grey suit jacket. She pulled out a folded sheaf of papers, damp from the earlier rain, and smoothed them out on the desk. Gossip is what people whisper in the break room, Linda, Catherine said, putting her glasses back on. This is a forensic accounting audit. Linda's eyes widened. What? Did you really think, Catherine asked, running a finger down the column of figures, that I spent my days just gardening and drinking tea? I have a master's in economics from Wharton, Linda. I personally review every single expenditure over $5,000 that leaves the Holloway Trust. Arthur spoke up from the door, his voice heavy with disappointment. She flagged the Grayson Florals invoices 3 months ago, Linda. We didn't want to believe it. I told her it was a coincidence. I told her you were a professional. You knew? Linda gasped, looking at Arthur. "You knew for 3 months and you let me." "We let you hang yourself," Catherine corrected her. "We needed proof of intent. We needed to see if it was just nepotism or active embezzlement. Tonight you gave us the answer." Catherine tapped the paper. "You cut the janitorial bonus pool by 15,000. Coincidentally, the invoicing for the floral arrangements, paid to a company registered to your sister's home address, was inflated by exactly $15,000 above market rate. You literally took the money out of Mr. Henderson's pocket and put it into your own." "It was a consulting fee," Linda cried out, desperation making her shrill. "My sister advised on the design. That's standard industry practice." "And Elite Bites?" Catherine continued, relentless. "The catering company run by your brother-in-law? They billed us for 500 guests. There are only 300 people in that ballroom. You charged the company for ghost meals, Linda. That's another $40,000 skimming off the top." Linda stood up, her hands slamming onto the desk. "This is entrapment. You can't prove I knew about the billing errors. I sign hundreds of invoices a week. I'm the vice president. I don't look at every line item." "But you do look at the staff," Catherine said softly. "You looked right at them. You looked at Ben, the student struggling to pay tuition. You looked at the florist you screamed at. You looked at me." Catherine stood up slowly. The grey suit suddenly seemed like armor. "You treated people like garbage because you thought they didn't matter. You thought power protected you. But you forgot the most basic rule of business, Linda." "What rule?" Linda spat, tears of rage finally spilling over. "The people are the business," Catherine said. "Without them, Arthur and I have nothing but empty trucks and silent warehouses. You didn't just steal money. You stole morale. You stole dignity. And that is an asset I cannot replace." Linda wiped her face, her makeup smearing. She turned to Arthur. "Arthur, please. I've given you 5 years. I increased the stock price. The board loves me. If you fire me tonight, right before the merger, the stock will tank. You need me." Arthur looked at her with a cold detachment that was more terrifying than anger. "The board loves money, Linda," Arthur said. "Do you know what they hate? PR nightmares and embezzlement scandals. Catherine isn't just my wife. She's the majority shareholder. If she calls for a vote of no confidence, you're gone. And she doesn't need a vote." Arthur pushed off the door and walked toward the desk. He stood next to Catherine, placing a hand on her shoulder. "She's firing you for cause," Arthur said, "effective immediately." Linda laughed, a manic, broken sound. "For cause? Good luck proving it without a lengthy trial. I'll sue you for wrongful termination. I'll drag this company through the mud. I'll tell the press you set me up. I'll tell them your wife likes to play dress-up and humiliate executives." Catherine smiled. It was the same smile she had worn when she told Ben that monsters get slain. "You won't sue us, Linda." "Oh, really? Why not?" "Because," Catherine said, picking up the phone on the desk and pressing a button, "if you agree to resign quietly and repay the stolen funds within 30 days, we won't hand this file over to the district attorney. We won't press criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and corporate theft." Linda froze. The color drained from her face completely. "Prison," she whispered. "Federal prison," Catherine clarified. "Wire fraud is a serious offense, and since you used the company email server to coordinate with your sister, we have the digital trail. It's all here." Catherine held up a USB drive she had pulled from her pocket. "So," Catherine said, dropping the drive onto the desk with a soft clatter, "you can walk out of here, go home, and never work in this industry again. Or you can leave in handcuffs. It's your move." Linda stared at the USB drive. It was small, silver, and innocuous. It contained the end of her life as she knew it. She looked at Arthur. He offered no mercy. She looked at Catherine. She saw only steel. Slowly, Linda reached out. Her hand was trembling violently. She picked up her clipboard, the symbol of her authority all night, and clutched it to her chest. I resign, she choked out. Good, Catherine said. Leave your company phone and your badge on the desk. Security will escort you to your car. Linda fumbled with her purse, dropping her phone onto the mahogany surface. She unpinned her ID badge and set it down. She looked small now, defeated. She walked to the door, but before she left, she turned back one last time. You enjoyed this, Linda accused, her voice weak. You enjoyed playing the maid. I didn't enjoy it, Catherine said, sitting back down. I endured it. There's a difference. Now get out. Linda Grayson walked out of the door and out of their lives. The silence in the office after Linda left was heavy, but it was a clean silence. The air felt lighter. Arthur let out a long breath and loosened his bow tie. Remind me never to play poker against you, Cat. You don't play poker, Arthur, she smiled, finally relaxing her posture. You play golf, and you cheat. Arthur chuckled, walking around the desk to kiss her forehead. I can't believe you actually did the waitressing shift. You could have just walked in here and fired her. It wouldn't have been enough, Catherine said, taking off her glasses and rubbing her eyes. If I had fired her from the boardroom, the staff would have just seen another executive power struggle. They wouldn't have known that we see them. They wouldn't have known that we care. So the undercover boss routine was necessary? Essential, she replied. Plus, I wanted to see if I could still carry a tray of 6 champagne flutes without spilling. Turns out it's like riding a bike. Arthur smiled, but his eyes were serious. You know the board is going to panic. Linda was the golden child. Let them panic, Catherine said, standing up. I'm taking over as interim COO. Arthur raised an eyebrow. You? You haven't held an operational title in 20 years. I've been running the family trust, Arthur. I know where every penny is buried. And clearly, she gestured to the door, the company needs a mother right now. Not a shark. A mother who clears tables, Arthur mused. Exactly. Now, zip me out of this suit. I have a gown in the locker room, but I think I'll stay in this. It sends a message. What message? That the person in charge isn't afraid to do the work. They walked back down to the ballroom together. The atmosphere had changed. The tension was gone, replaced by a confused murmur. The guests were still eating, but their eyes were darting toward the doors. When Catherine and Arthur re-entered, the room went quiet. But this time, it wasn't the silence of awkwardness. It was the silence of respect. They didn't go to the stage. They didn't go to the VIP table. Catherine walked straight to the back of the room, to table 42. The staff table. Ben, the engineering student, was standing there holding a pitcher of water, looking terrified. Sarah, the accountant, was staring at her plate. Mr. Henderson was clutching his napkin. They all stood up as Catherine approached. Mrs. Holloway, Ben stammered. I called you Cat. I told you to look out for the dragon lady. I am so sorry. I didn't know. Catherine smiled, and it was the warmest smile Ben had ever seen. You treated Cat with kindness, Ben, she said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. You warned me. You helped me. You treated a temp worker like a human being. You have nothing to apologize for. She turned to Sarah. And you, Sarah. You were brave enough to speak the truth to a stranger. That kind of integrity is rare in accounting. She looked at Mr. Henderson. And Mr. Henderson, I believe there was a matter of a holiday bonus. Mr. Henderson nodded slowly, his eyes wide. Arthur, Catherine called out. Arthur stepped forward. Yes, dear? I think we need to make an adjustment to the payroll immediately. The bonus pool for the maintenance and support staff is to be reinstated. Double the original amount. Take it out of the executive retreat budget. A gasp went through the room. The executive retreat was a sacred cow, a week in Aspen for the VPs. Consider it done, Arthur said, grinning. And, Catherine added, looking at Ben, Holloway Logistics has an engineering scholarship fund that has been dormant for a few years. I think it's time we reactivated it. Ben, come see me in my office on Monday. We'll discuss your tuition. Ben dropped the pitcher. Fortunately, it was plastic. Mrs. Holloway, don't thank me, she said. Just make sure you finish that degree. We need good engineers. She turned to the rest of the room. The board members, the bankers, the socialites. They were all watching. This company, Catherine said, her voice projecting to the back walls, was built on hard work, not on imported orchids, not on silk dresses. It was built by the people who drive the trucks, load the pallets, and clean the floors. Tonight, we forgot that. We won't forget it again. She picked up a glass of cheap red wine from the staff table. To the staff, she toasted. For a second, nobody moved. Then, Arthur raised his glass. Then Robert Sterling, seeing the way the wind was blowing, raised his. Then the mayor. To the staff, the room echoed. The applause started slowly from the back of the room. The waiters, the bussers, the bartenders. Then it spread forward. Soon the entire ballroom was clapping. Not a polite golf clap, but a roaring ovation. Catherine didn't bask in it. She simply set her glass down, patted Mr. Henderson on the shoulder, and turned to her husband. I'm starving, she whispered. And the filet mignon at the head table is cold. I think there's some burgers in the kitchen for the crew, Arthur whispered back. Perfect, Catherine said. Let's go sit with the staff. And they did. The billionaire CEO and the owner of the company pulled up 2 metal chairs at table 42, next to the janitor and the student, and ate hamburgers while the rest of the gala watched in awe. It was the biggest scandal in Seattle society that year, and it was the best thing that ever happened to Holloway Logistics. From that day on, whenever a new executive was hired at the company, they weren't given a corner office on their first day. They were given a grey apron and sent to the cafeteria to serve lunch. Because at Holloway Logistics, you didn't get to sit at the head of the table until you understood who was holding it up. 6 months later, the landscape of Holloway Logistics had changed entirely. It wasn't just the balance sheets, though those were healthier than they had been in a decade. It was the air in the building. The suffocating silence of fear had been replaced by the hum of productivity. In the executive boardroom on the top floor, the morning light streamed in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The long mahogany table was full, but the people sitting around it weren't just the old guard of bankers and investors. Catherine sat at the head of the table. She wore a sharp navy blazer, her glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the quarterly projections. To her right sat Arthur, looking more relaxed than he had in years. To her left sat the new VP of Operations, a man named David, who had started as a warehouse shift manager 15 years ago. Profits are up 12%, Catherine announced, looking over the rim of her glasses. Turnover in the warehouse is down to near zero. It turns out, when you pay people a living wage and treat them with respect, they actually want to work for you. Robert Sterling cleared his throat. I have to admit, Catherine, I was skeptical. I thought the Staff First initiative would bleed the budget. But the efficiency numbers are undeniable. You proved us wrong. We didn't just prove you wrong, Robert, Arthur added, a proud smile on his face. We proved that decency is profitable. The door to the boardroom opened, and a young man walked in carrying a stack of files. He wore a crisp shirt and a tie that was perfectly straight. "Here are the engineering reports for the new fleet updates, Mrs. Holloway," Ben said, placing the files down with confidence. "Thank you, Ben," Catherine said. "How are classes?" "Straight A's, Ma'am," Ben beamed. "And the internship is going great. The maintenance crew says the new robotic sorters are saving them 3 hours a night." "Good work," Catherine nodded. "You can stay for the strategic planning session if you like. You might learn something." Ben's eyes widened. An intern in a strategic planning session? It was unheard of. I would be honored. As the meeting wrapped up, Catherine walked over to the window. She looked down at the rainy streets of Seattle. Somewhere out there, she knew, Linda Grayson was learning her own lesson. Word had traveled fast. The forensic audit Catherine had threatened hadn't been a bluff. While they didn't press charges to avoid a public trial, the industry whisper network was far more effective than a court of law. Linda had been blacklisted from every major corporation in the Pacific Northwest. The last Arthur heard, she was managing a mid-sized car rental branch in Idaho, reporting to a district manager who was younger than Ben. It was a quiet, unglamorous end for a woman who had craved the spotlight. Arthur joined Catherine at the window, wrapping an arm around her waist. "You saved it, Cat," he whispered. "You saved all of it." "I just reminded everyone who we are," she replied, leaning into him. "We aren't the suits, Arthur. We're the people who built the suits." Down on the street level, a black sedan pulled up. But Catherine didn't move to leave. She turned back to the room, where a new executive hire was waiting to be introduced. He was a hot shot from New York, looking a bit too arrogant, checking his expensive watch. Catherine walked over to a cabinet in the corner of the boardroom. She opened it and pulled out a folded grey apron. She walked up to the new executive. "Welcome to Holloway Logistics," Catherine said, holding out the apron. The man looked confused. "I'm sorry? I'm the new director of marketing." "I know," Catherine smiled, her eyes twinkling with that same dangerous intelligence she had shown in the ballroom. "And at this company, the director of marketing spends their first day serving lunch in the cafeteria. It helps you understand the brand." The man looked at Arthur. Arthur just nodded. "Better put it on," Arthur said. "The boss is watching." The man hesitated, then slowly took the apron. He tied it around his waist. He looked ridiculous in his Italian suit and the stained grey fabric, but he also looked humble. Catherine patted him on the shoulder. "Excellent. The lunch rush starts in 10 minutes. Don't forget to smile." She grabbed her purse and linked arms with her husband. They walked out of the boardroom, leaving the executives to their work. They took the elevator down, but not to the lobby. They went to the loading dock. "Where are we going?" Arthur asked. "Mr. Henderson is retiring today," Catherine said. "I heard there's cake in the break room, and I'm not missing it for the world." They let her sit with the staff, because she was the staff. She was the heart, the soul, and the iron will of the company. And as she sliced a piece of sheet cake for the janitor who had been her only friend on that rainy night, Catherine Holloway had never felt more powerful. And that is the story of how a billionaire CEO's wife went undercover to save her husband's company from the inside out. It's a powerful reminder that true power doesn't come from a corner office or a title on a business card. It comes from how you treat the people who have nothing to offer you but their hard work. Linda learned the hard way that when you look down on others, you miss the fact that you might be standing on a trap door. Catherine showed us that the most important seat at the table isn't the one at the head, it's the one where you can serve others. If you enjoyed this story of karma, justice, and hidden identities, please take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness is a strength. And subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty more tales of drama and justice coming your way next week. Thanks for listening.